Known as the creator of the first animated feature film and the multiplane camera, what's her name? Let me tell ya. Hi everyone, I'm Lilly, and welcome to this episode of What's Her Name, where we celebrate female pioneers of film history. Today's episode is one Lotte Reiniger. Lotte was a director and a trailblazer in animation who made over 60 films. She saw animation as an opportunity for imaginative storytelling. Born on June 2nd, 1899 in Berlin, Germany, Lotte's fascination with animation and film started at a young age. At the age of 6, she was making figures out of paper to retell fables and fairy tales to her parents. She even cut a hole in her dining table, using paper puppets to turn her home into an animation studio. Later, she became very interested in acting and convinced her parents to enroll her in a theater group at the Max Reinhardt School of Acting. Here, she met film director and actor Paul Wegener, who quickly became impressed with her animation skills. He soon enlisted her to help him with his 1918 film, The Pied Piper of Hamelin, animated wooded puppet rats for the film. Her work with Wegener landed her a spot in the Institute of Cultural Research in Berlin. Here is where she met her husband and collaborator, Karl Koch. Her work caught the eye of Lois Hagen, who owned a film company in Potsdam, Germany. He invited Lotte and her team to a studio where they made The Adventures of Prince Achmed, the first feature-length animated film. The film was made with a crew of 5 people, and it took her 5 years to complete. Her animation technique was complex and meticulous. She hand-cut her figures out of black cardboard and thin lead. She would join the limbs together with wire hanging so that the figures were adjustable. The figures were manipulated frame by frame and shot via stop motion. She would spend hours at the Zoo Berlin studying how animals moved in order to perfect her own figures. She traveled to Egypt and Greece to study shadow play and silhouette representation. The Greek puppet show tradition of Karagiozis became a significant influence on her work. Some modern films, such as Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, have paid homage to her silhouette figures. Lotte also created an early version of the multiplane camera. This gave animation a new depth, movement, and complexity rather than being two-dimensional. To give the illusion of depth to the flat animation cell, she'd place her silhouettes on different horizontal planes stacked at an alternating level before photographing them from above. Early on in her career, it was difficult for her to find financing for her films. Lotte and her husband supplemented their income by making advertising films. The majority of her silhouette films were based on fairy tales and fables, but the presentation of the stories were more suited to adults than children, making it hard to market to larger audiences. Although Prince Achmed opened to positive reviews, over time film critics dismissed her work as pretty escapism that was pleasant to look at, but lacked seriousness and political undertones that her male contemporaries had in their films. With the introduction of sound, she realized that highly condensed parody films of well-known operas would be appealing to audiences familiar with them. However, they did not appeal to German audiences. She struggled to find distribution of her work, and her films did not meet the criteria set forth by the Nazi Party. When Hitler came to power, Lotte and her husband fled the country. She had to return in 1943 when her mother fell ill. Lotte had to make films for the Nazi Party in order to survive. Over the course of her career, Lotte made a combination of shorts, animated, and live-action films. Lotte's first animated short was The Ornament of the Heart and Love in 1919. Some of her other films include Dr. Dolittle, The Hunt for Luck, Cinderella, Puss in Boots, Hansel and Gretel, Tosca, and Carmen. Lotte and her husband moved to London in 1948, where they became British citizens. She made a series of short children's films for BBC.
Turned away. Each place they stopped seemed to be full.
She stopped making films when her husband died in 1963. In 1972, she was recognized with the Golden Reel Award at Berlin Film Festival for her contributions to German cinema. 2 years later, Goethe Institute sponsored her on a lecture tour of Canada and the US. The tour inspired her to make a few final short films, including The Rose and the Ring, 1979, and Duselchen and the Four Seasons. She died in Dentenhausen, Germany on June 19, 1981. She was 82. Disney is to blame for her lack of recognition. Although she created the multiplane camera, Disney studied this technique in order to make a more sophisticated version, which he patented. Despite having created The Adventures of Prince Achmed in 1926, many also consider Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, made in 1937, to be the first animated feature film.
Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?
Disney's fame overshadowed Lotte's work, even though she accomplished these feats first. A limited number of films available on 35mm and 60mm prints has resulted in underestimation of range of her work, and those made just prior to, during, and after World War II also remain almost unseen. Additionally, her work is spread across many countries, so it's difficult for audiences to find a uniform collection of her work. Many of her works made in Britain have been lost as well. Her name was Lotte Reiniger, and she was the queen of early animation. Animation looks pretty different these days, but without her work, it wouldn't be the same. Through the internet and social media, people are learning about Lotte and her work as her films have become more accessible. Thanks for watching, and tune in next time for another episode of What's Her Name?